The wind carried dust through the village of Agoni like a warning, dry and restless. It whispered through cracked doorways and slid beneath mats woven too thin from years of wear. Goats bleated weakly by the well, which had not been full since the season before last. The earth, once proud and red, now dulled to an ash-colored crust, where even weeds hesitated to grow. Amara sat beneath the shade of a crooked mango tree, her knees pulled close, a threadbare cloth around her shoulders. She did not speak. She rarely did. In a village where everyone talked too much and listened too little, she had learned that silence often heard more than sound ever could. Her eyes, wide and dark, flicked from face to face, shadow to shadow, catching things others missed, like how Uncle Doro's hands trembled more when he returned from council meetings, or how the older boys stole from the maize sacks during the night, laughing in whispers. Amara was the orphan child of a woman no one liked and a father no one ever mentioned. She had been left behind when fever claimed both parents, and since then she had belonged to everyone and no one. Auntie Bia fed her when she remembered. Uncle Doro made her fetch water even when her feet bled. Cousins used her silence as a game, daring her to scream when they pulled her hair, laughing when she didn't. But through it all, Amara watched. She knew when the rains failed. She knew when the elders began their closed-door meetings. She knew when the debts to the neighboring villages could no longer be ignored, and when the last of the palm oil jars had been opened. She even knew, before anyone said a word to her, that something had shifted. It came with the arrival of the merchant. He rode into the village with a donkey dragging a cart behind him, small bells tied to its harness chiming in time with its heavy steps. The man was strange, not old but not young either, with eyes that didn't blink often enough and rings on every finger. His clothes were too clean. His smile too easy. He set up beneath the baobab tree near the center of the village, and from his cart he unloaded things no one had seen in years: sugar bricks, colored beads, tin cups, dried fish wrapped in green leaves, and a single jar of glistening red palm oil. The jar sat at the edge of his wares like bait. Amara saw the way the elders looked at it. She heard the way their voices dropped when they gathered that evening behind the storage hut, their silhouettes long against the wall as the sun dipped low. She heard her name. She always heard her name. That night she didn't sleep. In the morning Auntie Bia woke her with a rough hand. "Dress nicely," she said, not looking at her. "We're going to the square." Amara didn't ask why. She didn't ask where. She simply wrapped her scarf tight and followed. The silence between her and her aunt was thicker than smoke. At the center of the village, a small crowd had gathered. Children sat cross-legged watching. Elders stood in a half-circle. The merchant leaned against his cart, arms crossed. Behind him, the palm oil jar glowed like fire trapped in glass. Uncle Doro stepped forward, clearing his throat. "This child," he said, placing a hand on Amara's shoulder, "has been raised by the village since she lost her family. But times are hard. And mouths must be fed." There was no ceremony. No ritual. Just that. The merchant stepped forward, looking Amara up and down as if assessing the quality of livestock. She did not flinch. His eyes paused on hers for a moment longer than expected, and something unreadable passed between them. "I accept," he said. And that was it. The jar changed hands. The elders murmured blessings. The merchant placed a chain loosely around Amara's wrists, not tight, not cruel, but final. She still didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes never left the elders, her relatives, the children who looked at her with wide, scared eyes. She memorized every face, every turn of a mouth, every shoulder that turned away. The merchant led her out of the village before noon. No one stopped them. No one looked back. They walked in silence for most of the day. The road was dry and cracked, winding through shriveled fields and forests of trees too tired to bloom. The chain clinked softly as Amara walked behind the cart. She didn't drag her feet. She didn't cry. Near sunset, the merchant finally spoke. "You didn't scream," he said, glancing back. "Most do." Amara said nothing. "Not even when they traded you. Not even when I chained you. Still nothing." "Your eyes, girl," he muttered. "They watch like the forest." She blinked slowly, but her gaze never wavered. That night, they camped by a dried-out riverbed. The merchant built a small fire, shared a piece of cassava and a sip of water. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak more than necessary. But as he drifted into sleep, Amara sat with her knees hugged to her chest, the flames reflecting in her eyes. She looked at her wrists, at the chain. And then she did something she had not done since she was a child. She bit her lip until it bled and whispered her own name, so softly it disappeared into the wind. Amara. Felt like an anchor. The chain was still there. The journey ahead was unknown. But her name remained, and her eyes kept watching. She did not know yet what power she would one day call, or how her silence would become a blade, but she knew she would not forget. Every face, every word, every lie, every hand that traded her for a jar of oil. In the firelight she imagined them all written into her skin, names etched like scars, truths that would not be silenced. She did not know how she would return. The road stretched like a scar across the land, winding through dust and rock and the broken bones of villages long abandoned. Amara walked behind the cart, wrists still loosely chained, the sun clawing at her back. The merchant did not speak to her. He whistled sometimes, a sharp, tuneless sound that blended with the creak of the wheels and the wheezing of the donkey. The wind stirred little cyclones of grit along the path, and every breath tasted of sand and smoke. She walked until her feet blistered and bled. But she did not stumble. She did not cry. She did not speak. They passed through the burnt-out husk of a forest. Charred trunks stood like gravestones and crows followed them from above. She saw no animals, no fruit. Only ash. The merchant paused once, plucking a blackened twig from the ground and sniffing it. "Which fire?" he muttered. "Still fresh." He tossed the twig and kept walking. They reached a river after 2 days. It flowed slow and brown, choked with weeds. On its bank, under the shade of wilted palms, a group had gathered, another caravan of sorts. There were other girls there and boys too. Some were chained, others not. Some stared hollow-eyed at the sky. Some whispered to each other in tongues Amara didn't know. All were young. All had been taken. She watched. No one welcomed her. No one asked where she came from. They saw the chain and looked away. She recognized the look in their eyes. It was the same one she'd seen in the village when mothers looked at goats being led to slaughter. Necessary. Pitiful. Distant. The merchant spoke with the others, trading coin and stories. He gestured to Amara once, then to the others. A few nods. One of the other men laughed. Then she was pulled into the cluster, told to sit. Someone handed her a piece of bread. She ate slowly, chewing without taste, eyes flicking from one face to another. One of the boys sat beside her. He was older by a few years, with a jagged scar down his cheek. He didn't look at her when he spoke. "You knew." She didn't answer. He sighed. "Doesn't matter. Won't matter. They don't keep us long." She turned her head slightly. "Some of us go to the mines," he continued. "Some to the fields. Some," he stopped. "Some just vanish." He stood and walked away before she could react. That night they made camp by the water. Fires were lit. Guards were posted. Amara was not chained this time, none of them were. But no one ran. Where would they go? Into the river? Into the ash forest? Into nothing? She sat beside a tree and watched the flames flicker. She heard the girls whispering. Some cried. One sang softly to herself, rocking back and forth. The song was in another language, but the ache in her voice needed no translation. Amara pulled her knees to her chest. She felt the silence settle around her like a shroud. Then, slowly, she reached into the hem of her wrapper and pulled out a shard of bone she had hidden there since the first night, the pointed tip of a chicken leg from a meal Auntie Bia had given her long ago. She had sharpened it against stone when the merchant wasn't looking. It fit in her hand like it had always belonged there. She stared at her forearm. Pale, unmarked. A blank scroll. She pressed the tip of the bone to her skin. It hurt. But she didn't flinch. The first letter came easily. The second slower. She wasn't writing with full strokes, just shallow cuts, enough to scar, not bleed. She wrote the name with precision, careful and clean, just as she had seen the scribes do when marking debts. Doro. Her uncle. She paused after the last letter, staring at the name as it reddened and puffed. It shimmered faintly under the firelight. For a moment, it seemed to whisper, not in sound but in presence. A sense, a knowing. The name was hers now. Not his. A memory turned weapon. She cleaned the shard and tucked it back into her cloth. Her arm burned, but the pain felt pure. Like something had shifted inside her. Like the silence was growing teeth. By morning they were moving again. The terrain changed as they traveled. Dry fields turned to stone paths. Villages came and went. In one she saw a girl no older than 10 being handed over in exchange for salt. In another, a boy cried as his mother kissed his head and turned away. Mar watched. She noticed how the traders used language like rope, tying people to guilt and survival. How they called the children gifts or offers, never by their names. How they smiled as they bartered. How none of them looked at the eyes of the ones they sold. She watched how guards shifted when they lied. How merchants weighed their words like fruit. She listened to every deal, every whisper. She never spoke. The others began to notice her stillness. Some avoided her. One girl spat near her feet and muttered, "Snake." But Amara didn't respond. She just kept learning. At night, when the fires burned low and the guards drifted into sleep, she carved more names. The cousin who laughed as she was dragged away. The elder who held the jar of palm oil like a trophy. The one who said nothing when she reached for help. She carved them all one by one. Not deep. Not messy. Just enough to last. Her arm became a ledger. One night, a girl woke screaming. She claimed she'd seen something in the trees, eyes watching, mouths moving in the dark. The others hushed her. But Amara saw them glance at her afterward. Like maybe the eyes were hers. A week passed. Then two. One of the boys fell ill. The merchants left him behind. They didn't even check if he was breathing. Amara sat beside his body for a long time after they left, her fingers brushing the dirt. She didn't cry. She carved his name too. Not because he betrayed her, but because he mattered. Eventually they reached the coast. She smelled salt before she saw the sea. The air grew thick. The trees turned strange. The ground felt softer, too alive. The caravan stopped at a large gate, tall, rusted, with a bell that rang once like a warning. Men in uniforms waited beyond it, arms crossed. Transactions began immediately. Ledgers opened. Names called. Amara knew she was close to being lost forever. But she didn't shake. Didn't run. Her skin burned with memory. The journey ended at dusk on the 12th day. The caravan wound down a narrow path where the trees pressed in too tightly, branches clawing at shoulders and hair. At the end of the trail stood a compound hidden in the wet air and overgrown vines, its high walls rising from the earth like a forgotten tomb. No signs marked the place. No guard smiled. But the gates opened as if they'd been waiting. The cart creaked through the opening and Amara stepped into the house of trade. Inside the world changed. Stone paths curved through trimmed courtyards, and everywhere was the sound of rustling cloth and shuffling feet. Servants moved like ghosts, heads bowed, voices swallowed. None looked up. None smiled. Everything smelled faintly of palm oil and smoke. The merchant spoke with a tall man at the entry. The man didn't look at Amara until the exchange was done. Then a nod. A whistle. Two guards approached, and Amara was taken without a word. She didn't resist. She memorized every step. They brought her to a side building with barred windows and a thick wooden door. Inside, girls sat in silence, their eyes dull, their backs straight as stone. A woman in a gray head wrap motioned to her. "Clothes off," she said. "Scrub. No names here. No noise." Amara obeyed, but not for the reasons they thought. They stripped her cloth and her past, bathed her in cold water, rubbed her skin raw with herbs that stung. They poured oil on her scalp, cut her hair short, and dressed her in plain linen. When they handed her a band of leather to wear around her neck, she accepted it quietly. "Speak only when spoken to," the woman said. "If you disobey, the switch speaks louder." No one told her what the place was for. But she saw it. Rich visitors came in fine slippers and gold-threaded sleeves. They walked through the halls and picked girls like fruit. Some girls were taken for kitchens, some for the beds. Some were not seen again. Amara was set to laundry. She carried buckets twice her weight, boiled linens till her hands blistered, swept floors until her arms trembled. At night, she slept on the hard mat in the servant quarters, lined up beside the others like forgotten tools. She never spoke. She never cried. But she watched. She watched how the house functioned like a machine, every beat timed, every breath managed. The gray-wrapped woman was the overseer, feared more than the guards. A bell rang for meals. 2 knocks meant an order. 3 meant punishment. Amara obeyed each signal not because she feared them, but because she was listening for a pattern. On the 5th night, while scrubbing soot from a pot, an older servant approached. She was small and bent, her eyes yellowed but sharp. She didn't speak at first. Just sat near Amara and scrubbed alongside her. "I saw your arm," the woman said finally, soft as dust. "You carved them deep." Amara froze. "No fear," the woman whispered. "I was carved once too." She held up her sleeve, revealing faded marks. "Names, places, symbols. They forget that skin remembers," she added. "But we don't." Amara looked at her for the first time. "My name was Nene," the woman said. "Once. Now they call me Cook. But names don't die just because others stop using them." Amara nodded once. A thread of understanding passed between them, wordless and old. Over the days that followed, Nene taught her. Not openly. Never directly. but through glances, hands and murmurs in the dark. She showed her how to write marks that meant more than names, runes from before the colonials came, symbols that whispered to the wind, lines that meant watch, remember, and strike when ready. She taught her the servant signs, how to warn another with a cough, how to pass news in folded linens, how to disappear behind a closed door without sound. Some of the others, Nene said one night while they pretended to sort cassava, are waiting, like you, for the right moment. Amara didn't ask what moment. She didn't have to. In the halls she began to see the signs. Scratches on doors. Pebbles placed in careful lines. Cloth tied in double knots. A map invisible to the masters of the house. And at night the whispers began. Not from the mouths of the servants, but from the walls. From the trees beyond the window. From the roots under her mat. They carried stories, of girls who escaped, of masters who vanished, of spirits who walked wearing the names of the dead on their skin. Magic, Nene had said, spitting into the fire. They think they broke it, buried it with the old gods. But blood remembers. So does earth. Amara began to dream. Of oil that ran like fire. Of chains melting into rivers. Of a voice, her own, calling names that shook the ground. She did not understand it all yet. But she knew this, the house of trade was not eternal. It only believed itself to be. One night a visitor came. He was tall, foreign, dressed in red silks. His face was hidden behind a gold mask, and he carried a cane with a carved lion's head. He inspected the servants with a slow eye as if choosing meat. When he passed Amara he paused, tilted his head. "This one," he said. His voice rasped like leaves. "She does not belong." The overseer hesitated. "She is new. Send her to the north wing," he said. "I will see her again." That night, Nene found her in the laundry. She pressed something into her hand, a sharpened sliver of bone, like the one Amara had lost weeks ago. "Make the marks," Nene said. "When the moment comes, the names will rise." Amara nodded. That night, beneath her mat, she carved another name into her thigh, the merchant's. The one who traded her. She slept with the mark pressed to the earth. And in the darkness, the house shivered. The first time it happened, Amara was alone in the laundry room. The others had gone to sleep, and only the creaking of the water buckets and the breath of the night wind kept her company. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the names already etched into her skin: Doro, Elder Keen, Uncle Toby, the merchant. They had begun to darken, to deepen in color. When the moonlight hit them, they shimmered faintly as though remembering. That night, she took the bone shard Nene had given her and pressed it again to her skin, just below the curve of her shoulder. This time she carved slowly. Not a name she had known, but one she had heard whispered, the guard with the crooked teeth who struck her for dropping a bowl, calling her less than dust. He'd laughed. She didn't know his name, but she knew his face. So she carved the memory of him, not letters but the shape of his sneer, the motion of his hand, the feel of her bruised cheek. When she finished, her skin pulsed, and the mark glowed under the moonlight, dim but alive. The next day she saw him again. He reached for her collar roughly to inspect the mark of her status, but the moment his fingers touched her, he recoiled. His hand blistered. He stared at her, wild-eyed, backing away as if burned. He said nothing, and neither did she. That night she added a new mark. And with each cut, her body remembered. Not just the pain but the shape of it. The echo of it. She could feel her skin awakening with every etched name, as if each scar became a nerve, a signal to the world. I have not forgotten. Some nights she dreamed in blood and fire. She saw the merchant screaming in a pit. The elders choking on oil. Sometimes she woke sweating, heart pounding, but never afraid. Something within her was rising. Her silence was no longer a cage. It was a chamber, a place to gather power. Nene began to notice. "You are glowing," she said one night. "Even when the lanterns are out." Amara didn't answer. Nene didn't need her to. "You're becoming something they never planned for." The others began to notice too. Girls who used to sneer at her now watched from the corners of their eyes. Some stepped aside when she passed. Some whispered at night. One girl Ao dared to ask her, "What are you?" Amara only looked at her, and the girl went quiet as if hearing something she didn't understand. In the kitchens, a boy tripped and spilled a bowl of stew. The overseer raised her cane to strike him, but paused mid-swing when Amara looked at her. Just looked. The cane lowered slowly. The overseer blinked like she'd forgotten what she was doing. Amara didn't smile. Later that night she carved another name. This time her skin bled longer. Not from pain but from power. The blood was thick, almost tar-like, and when she wiped it away, the mark glowed brighter than the others. The next morning the overseer walked into a doorframe and broke her wrist. No one said a word. No one dared. Amara learned to read the way her body responded to each name. Some marks burned hot. Some hummed. One near her spine twitched constantly, the name of the cousin who mocked her tears the day she was taken. That twitch reminded her to stay alert. It whispered when danger approached. Her skin was no longer just a surface. It was memory. It was map. It was mirror. She could walk past the richest visitors and see their greed reflected in her glowing scars. She could sit beside other servants and know, from the ache in her wrist or the pulse in her ankle, which ones had betrayed others and which ones had only ever survived. One day while sweeping the northern corridor she passed the tall visitor again, the one with the lion cane and the gold mask. He stopped her with a motion of his hand. She stood still. He walked a slow circle around her, studying her. "You haven't spoken once," he said almost admiringly. "But you speak loudly." She did not move. He stepped closer. "You don't belong here. Not anymore." He reached out a hand to touch her arm. The mark there flared, one of the earliest, carved for the man who chained her wrists on her first day in the house. The visitor froze, his hand hovering inches away, then withdrew. His smile did not return. He left without another word. That night she carved her biggest mark yet. It stretched from her shoulder down to her elbow, the name of the house itself. Not the people. Not the guards. The place. The building. The walls. The system. She didn't know what language it should be in, so she used every symbol she'd learned from Nene. Old curved ones. Angular ones. Dots and slashes. Spirals and lines that didn't mean anything to the overseers, but that made the floor beneath her tremble faintly when she pressed them in. Her body pulsed with it. Her bones felt hollow and full at the same time. And still she remained silent. Not once did she scream during a whipping. Not once did she sob when cleaning wounds. But the power in her skin grew louder with each day. And soon, the silence she wore became its own kind of song. One morning, the guards found one of their own unconscious in the storeroom. His hand had blackened. His mouth was swollen. He muttered her name in sleep over and over, though no one had heard her speak it. They began to whisper that she was cursed. She heard one of the new cooks say, "That girl's skin remembers. It fights back." They said it like a warning. And she liked that. Because the skin remembers. Every blow. Every betrayal. Every man who traded her name for a jar of oil. She remembered. And now her body did too. Under the shadow of the blood moon, the compound pulsed with the chaos of celebration. Torches flared against the night sky, casting red-tinted light over the high stone walls. Drums beat in a fast rhythm, and the master's laughter echoed through the courtyards. The air stank of roasted meat, spilled wine, and the thick smoke of incense. It was a night of indulgence for the masters, a night of opportunity for her. For months she had waited, studied every corner of the house of trade, learned the shift patterns of the guards, the way the moonlight fell on the walls, the times when even the cruelest overseers became sluggish with drink. And tonight the red moon hung heavy like an omen. It was time. She moved through the servants' corridor, silent as a whisper. Her bare feet glided over the stone floor, her breath steady. Behind her, 5 others followed, each of them scarred, frightened, desperate. One was a boy no older than 10, another an old woman whose fingers had been broken too many times. The rest were like her, young but used up, bodies worn by labor, eyes too old for their faces. They did not speak. They only followed. The plan had been whispered over weeks, pieced together with nods and eye signals, hidden beneath trays of food, tucked into cleaning rags, traced in ash on the back of kitchen pots and wiped clean before sunrise. They slipped into the shadow of the outer wall, past a pile of discarded wood and broken chains. She had discovered a narrow grate 3 months ago, one the size of a child's shoulders, used for drainage during floods. It had taken weeks to loosen the stones around it with a stolen chisel and patience. Tonight she pried the last stone free, her fingers raw, her knuckles bleeding. One by one they slid through the narrow opening. The boy whimpered but crawled forward. The old woman took longer, but she made it, biting down her groans. When she pulled herself through last, she pressed the stone back just enough to hide the gap. The blood moon watched silently. They moved fast into the swamp behind the compound, guided by her memory and instinct. The night insect screamed. Her bare arms stung from cuts and brambles. She did not slow. The compound faded behind them, the drums growing faint. They reached a low ridge she had marked during an earlier punishment task, She had been forced to carry water far beyond the gates and saw the lay of the land from there. She had memorized every rock, every tree with twisted roots. It was there she turned and whispered, "We go north. Stay low. Don't stop." They trudged through marshes, through twisted undergrowth, their bodies soaked with sweat, their mouths dry. The moon followed them, watching. At times she thought she could hear the growl of hounds, but it was just wind. The others looked to her for direction, trusting her. Even the old woman did not complain. They crossed a dry riverbed and she led them into a thicket of tall grass, where they rested briefly. Her limbs ached, but she didn't allow herself to close her eyes. She counted the heads in the dark. 1, 2, 3 for, only 4? She tensed. One missing. The younger man, Sibo. He had been the one to carry the sack of food. He had always been too quiet, too smooth. She had watched him eye the guards during mealtime, laughing a little too loud when they joked. Her heart sank. A crackling sound in the brush behind them confirmed her fear. Voices followed. The thud of boots. She didn't wait. "Go," she hissed. "To the trees." They scattered. She grabbed the boy's hand and dragged him as she ran. Arrows flew overhead. One buried itself in the ground inches from her foot. She didn't look back. She felt, rather than saw, one of the others fall. The old woman tripped, but a second girl lifted her and kept going. They reached the tree line where thick shadows swallowed them. The guards did not follow far. They never did, not deep into this land. There were old fears here, tales of curses and spirits. The masters were cruel, but they believed in omens. By morning they had reached a small clearing. The remaining escapees collapsed to the ground, heaving sobs, too exhausted to speak. She did not cry. Her chest burned with rage. She had trusted Sibo. She had risked everything. She walked a little farther, found a wide, flat stone by a crooked tree. She knelt. With a sharp shard of pottery she had hidden in her waistband, she carved a name, not into her skin this time but into the rock. Sibo. She carved each letter deep. Her fingers bled. When it was done she stared at it. Then beneath his name she scratched a warning in the old tongue, one she had learned from her grandmother before they took her away. "The blood you sell will not forget you." She left the stone half buried under dry leaves, visible enough for someone to find, hidden enough not to attract random eyes. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was a promise. By midday she returned to the others. She wrapped the boy's feet with strips of cloth torn from her dress. She checked the old woman's bruises and she took a stick and began carving lines in the dirt to show the next path. They still had far to go, across the hills toward the hidden village that might shelter them, where the air was clean and no whips cracked in the morning. As they moved again she felt the eyes of the forest on her, but not with fear. The red moon had faded, replaced by gray dawn. But something ancient had been set in motion under its light. She had escaped, yes, but more than that, she had led. She had left a message for the betrayer. She had claimed a power beyond chains or silence. And though her skin no longer bore his name, the earth itself would remember. She returned just as the sun dipped behind the hills, wrapped in a dark cloak that dragged dust behind her, her face hidden in the folds of shadow. The road into the village had not changed. The same crooked fence posts, the same stubborn bramble at the bend, the same leaning shrine with its weather-beaten offerings of millet and coin. But the air felt heavier now, as if the land itself sensed her footsteps before they touched the earth. No one saw her arrive at first. No dogs barked. No elders looked up from their porch stools. She was a ghost at the edge of memory. The village had not spoken her name in years. They had told themselves she had died in the north, sold for a jar of palm oil and forgotten like so many others. Her stepmother had cried crocodile tears for half a day before wearing her beads to market the next morning. No prayers had been offered. No ashes scattered. No child dared ask where the girl with the silent eyes had gone. Now she walked past the goat pens, past the gathering tree with its ancient scars, and all who saw her simply stared. A trader lowered his calabash, squinting. A weaver paused her shuttle. A group of children playing near the well stopped mid-game, a stone frozen in mid-air, then thudded to the ground. Her hood remained up and she said nothing. She did not need to. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of charcoal and old rain. That was when the first elder noticed. He was sitting near the meeting hut, chewing cola, his gaze half lost in the clouds. His eyes flicked to her, about to dismiss her as another dust-covered traveler, until the wind pushed her cloak aside. Then he saw the carvings. Names, etched in faint ridges across her collarbone and arms, shimmered softly under the dying sun. They were not tattoos. They were deeper. Older. The skin did not bleed but glowed, like embers under ashes. Names twisted and curled in the language of the north, the trade tongue and the dialect of their own village. Names of traders, overseers, guards, buyers, and one name they all recognized, Ezeka, her stepmother. The elder's breath caught. His kola nut dropped from his fingers, rolling into the dust. Around him, others began to turn. Whispers rustled like dry leaves. "Who is she?" someone murmured. "She walks like the girl?" "No. The girl is dead. She was taken. But those marks. She was sold for oil. She's back." She moved through them without speaking. They parted without knowing why. An old woman crossed herself with shaking fingers. A toddler burst into tears. The wind followed her, low and dry, stirring dust devils that chased her footprints. At the market square she stopped. The trader's laughter died. A calabash cracked on the ground. The scent of palm wine turned sour. She lowered her hood. Some gasped. Others recoiled. Her face was not the one they remembered. It was sharper now, leaner, her eyes deeper set. But something in the cheekbones, the shape of the mouth, the tilt of her head, it was her. And yet not. The carvings made her something else. Her skin moved like it remembered pain. Every step she took, the air tensed. A child whispered, "Mama, why does the light bend around her?" The elders were summoned. They shuffled forward with ceremonial staffs and stiff prayers, trying to look firm. But their eyes betrayed them. They saw what everyone saw. Crops had begun to yellow at the edges. Leaves on the cassava plants drooped. The patch near the mango grove had dried, and fruit had fallen unripe. Chickens refused to cluck. The village dogs whined and backed away, ears flat. "She brings something with her," one elder said, barely above a whisper. "She brings truth," said another, an old woman who had once fetched herbs with her grandmother. The chief was called next. He arrived with his sons, all proud backs and sharp spears, but their eyes flickered toward her and would not meet hers. The carvings pulsed as he approached. One of his sons took a step back without realizing it. The other dropped his spear. "You," the chief said, trying to gather his voice. "You return. What do you want here?" She said nothing. "What have you brought on your skin?" Still nothing. "Speak," he barked. She turned her head slowly. The carvings flared faintly, not with light but with memory. Pain echoed in the air around her. The wind died. Somewhere a bird fell silent. At the well, the water line dropped audibly, a gurgling sound, then a hollow gasp. When a woman leaned to draw water, the rope slipped from her hand and dropped with a splash. She looked down. Nothing came up. "The well?" she murmured. Children backed away. Some ran. But one small girl remained, eyes wide, looking at her the way one looks at a tale come to life. "You're the one who was sold," she said softly. "The one they traded for oil." Her cloak rippled. "Yes," she said. The voice was like rusted iron being forced open. Like silence breaking. "Why are you here?" the chief asked again, this time not as a question but a plea. She raised her arm. The names on her skin shimmered in the last of the sunlight. The villagers watched. The names pulsed one by one, and the ground seemed to shift beneath their feet. "They are not forgotten," she said. "The ones who traded. The ones who whipped. The ones who stood silent." Her eyes moved to the elders. The ones who watched. A heavy stillness wrapped the square. Her stepmother had not come out yet. Perhaps she had heard. Perhaps she was hiding. Or perhaps the carvings had already found her. A chicken dropped dead near the yam stall. "The land remembers," she said, eyes on the chief. "And now so does the skin." "You bring curses," one elder croaked. She looked at him, and the name carved just below her throat glowed faintly. His face turned gray. "I bring what was given," she said. Someone cried out. "Enough!" another shouted, desperate. "You want apology? Compensation? The girl is gone. We were told she was dead. I was told I was worthless." She stepped forward. The air thinned. Behind her, the shadows deepened, though the sun had not fully set. She did not shout. She did not threaten. She merely stood, her presence uncoiling like old roots dug deep into memory and rot. "I want nothing," she said. "I have taken what was owed. I am here to return what was given." At that, the crops near the square wilted visibly as if blighted by time. The dust rose. Someone fell to their knees. And still she did not move. "You will leave again?" the chief asked. "Yes," she replied. "But not yet." "For how long?" he dared ask. She turned her face toward the distant hills. Until the names stopped glowing. Then she walked through the village square, past her childhood home. No one dared stop her. Her stepmother, watching through a crack in the shutter, wept without sound. And that night, the village slept with their doors bolted and prayers under their tongues. But the children whispered stories in their corners. Of a girl traded for oil. Of a name that shimmered under moonlight. Of the silence that had returned, cloaked and alive, carrying the truth carved in her flesh. The gathering was her idea. She called no council, sought no permission from the chief, and issued no summons. She simply stood beneath the great palm tree in the village square as the sun rose, her cloak folded at her feet, her carved skin exposed to the air, and waited. The villagers came slowly at first, curious, hesitant. Some clutched charms. Others carried stools or baskets as if pretending they weren't there for her. But they came. Even those who claimed they had not seen her arrival now craned their necks to look. The chief stood near the edge of the square, arms folded tightly. His sons flanked him, one still with a bandage around his wrist from where he'd dropped his spear 2 days earlier. The women gathered in clusters, lips pressed thin. The children were quiet, wide-eyed. And from a shaded doorway her stepmother watched with her shawl pulled tight. No drums, no flute, no chants. Just her voice when she finally spoke, low and even like water running over stone. "Today," she said, "we name what was hidden." A rustle passed through the crowd like wind through brittle leaves. Some turned their faces. Others stepped back. She did not raise her voice. "One by one I will speak," she said. "You will not interrupt me. I do not need your approval. My skin knows the truth." She stepped forward once. The carvings across her arms shimmered softly, not glowing now but breathing, lines flexing, curling, revealing themselves like old wounds opening. The first name she spoke was Akomo. A murmur. A stir in the back. "She lies," someone shouted. "Akomo's a good man." She turned, and the name flared across her shoulder. The air above it shimmered like heat. A faint trace of smoke rose from her skin and hovered, spelling the name again in the open air. Akomo staggered. He had been standing near the dying pots. Now he dropped to his knees, hands over his mouth. I only took coin," he stammered. "I didn't know what I only gave directions." Her expression did not change. "That was enough," she said. The smoke lingered a moment longer, then drifted into the sky. She spoke again. "Naba." This time a woman cried out. No, she was a child. She didn't know. "You can't." Her forearm flared. The name appeared again in smoke. People turned toward the woman clutching her stomach, eyes darting wildly. "I was afraid," she whispered. "They said they'd burn my home. I only said what I was told." "You said I stole food," the woman said softly. "So they took me." Another name, Hagen. Someone in the back turned and ran. His feet slapped against the dry ground, his shadow long and panicked. No one stopped him. She did not look up. Her chest glowed now, names surfacing one by one, smoke curling from her skin as though her flesh had learned the language of fire. Each name spoken caused the air to grow heavier. A fly dropped mid-flight. A goat buckled to its knees. Zero. The name appeared on her back. An old man doubled over. "It was a mistake," he cried. "They told me she had a curse. Her birth was unlucky. I didn't know it would mean chains." "You prayed with my mother," she replied. "Then you took silver." The crowd grew restless. Some tried to move away. Others remained frozen. She kept going. Maliko. Tira. Abasat. One by one the names surfaced, each accompanied by a reaction. Denials, weeping, silence, collapse. The names didn't just glow now. They moved. The smoke writhed into shapes, hands taking, lips whispering, a coin passed behind a back, a locked door, a girl crying against a wall while elders averted their eyes. A woman clutched her head and screamed. "Stop. Enough." She turned slowly. "You haven't heard your name yet." Then came the name that stopped all sound, Elder Danzo. The man staggered as though struck. He was seated on a stool carved with ancestral symbols. He had presided over births, weddings, even death rites. Now he clutched his chest as the name rose from her skin in bright, sharp letters. The smoke turned crimson, not gray. He tried to speak, tried to curse her, but his voice failed. "You signed the scroll," she said. "Your seal sent me to the traders. You called it balance. I did what I thought." His eyes rolled back. He collapsed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The chief moved, stepped forward, but not to help the elder. His face was pale. His hands trembled. His gaze flicked to her arms. The carvings there shifted again. She paused. Then she said, this is not revenge. She walked slowly to the center of the square where the great palm tree stood. It had been the village's heart for generations. Its fruit fed the people, its fronds used for shelter and ceremony. Children had been named beneath its leaves. She placed her hand on its trunk. This is memory, she said. And the tree cracked. A deep, echoing sound, wood splitting from within. A jagged scar opened down the trunk. Sap oozed like blood. The wind died. Not a bird chirped. The village stared in silence. She turned back to them. I do not need your punishment. The earth sees. The tree hears. The water knows. Someone sobbed. Another knelt and touched her own forehead to the ground. The children, though, they watched with wide, bright eyes, not afraid but awed. One of them stepped forward, a girl barely 8, and whispered, Will you carve their names on me too? So I never forget. She looked at the child for a long time. No, she said gently. Your skin is for new things. These names are mine to carry. And she turned, walking past the fallen elder, past the women clutching beads, past her stepmother's shut door, and into the dusk, smoke still curling from her skin. The names remained behind her, burned not just into memory, but into the soil, the tree, and the air itself. At first it was just discomfort. A strange stillness in the air. A heaviness pressing down on the village like an unseen hand. The goats bleated through the night, refusing to feed. Roosters failed to crow at dawn. Smoke from cooking fires wouldn't rise straight but twisted sideways, like it was trying to escape the earth. Children woke crying, speaking of shadows that leaned too close, of trees that spoke their names in the dark. But none of these things frightened the villagers as much as the silence from Amara herself. She didn't speak again after the naming ceremony. She walked the village as if the paths remembered her, her bare feet pressing into the dirt that once rejected her. She visited no house, asked for no food, made no demands. Her cloak returned to her shoulders, her carvings hidden, but everyone knew they were there. The shimmer of names beneath the fabric seemed to pulse when she passed. Crops bent away from the huts of those she'd named. Birds took flight when the guilty came near. Even the dogs refused their master's calls. The villagers whispered, but only in corners, only behind cupped hands. To speak Amara's name in the open had become like tasting metal, wrong and dangerous. Even those who had not been named grew anxious. For if the land had eyes and if silence remembered, then who else had a part in her suffering? Who had watched and done nothing? Who had shrugged and walked away when she cried? The chief's son fell ill first. Not the youngest, not the one who had looked down during the gathering, but the eldest, the one who had once laughed while she was beaten near the well for refusing to bow to the merchant. His fever came quickly. His tongue swelled. His mother brought offerings to the shrine, but the candles refused to stay lit. The medicine woman washed his limbs with blessed oil, but her hands blistered upon contact. He died on the third night. And in the morning his grave could not be dug. The soil spit out the shovel. Then came the goats. Those owned by Tira, the woman who had accused Amara of theft all those years ago. They ran from her when she approached. When she tried to feed them, they bit her hand. One died after drinking water she had touched. Another simply disappeared. Her husband left the village the next day, taking their youngest child, refusing to explain. The air's turned sour, he muttered. It sticks to the bones. The whispers began then, not from mouths but from the wind itself. At night the breeze carried voices. Not full sentences, just names. Como. Maliko. Jiro. Over and over. The children heard it in their sleep. The elders heard it while sweeping their thresholds. Some claimed the wind brought with it a smell, of old oil and burned rope. One woman claimed she woke to find ash on her tongue. Amara walked through it all, untouched. When asked why she didn't leave, she said nothing. She merely looked at the old palm tree, now split and weeping sap, and sat beneath it as if waiting. The land did the rest. A cow gave birth to a calf with a twisted leg near Elder Danzo's house. That same morning, his remaining son was found unconscious near the shrine, unable to speak. Rumors spread quickly that he had tried to deface the stone where Amara's name had been carved years before, one of the few pieces of her childhood left unburned. His hand now curled inward like it had touched flame. They sent a runner to the next village, begging a spirit talker to come. The man arrived with beads, feathers, and chants, but the moment he saw Amara, he went silent. She is not possessed, he said. She is carrying. Carrying what? Asked the chief, eyes sunken with sleeplessness. The spirit talker bowed his head. The memory of the land. Some villagers began leaving. Just a few at first. The trader's apprentice, 2 girls who had watched Amara be taken and said nothing. then a mother and son. Then a group of 3 who fled in the night without even packing yams. But the worst came on the 7th night. The merchant. The one who had paid for her with a jar of palm oil. He had long since left the village, grown richer in another town, his caravan wide, his slaves many. He had not returned, nor sent word. But on the 7th night after the naming, his body was found on the path outside the village gates. No one had seen who left it there. No one heard horses, no cart wheels, no voices. But there he was, folded on himself like a broken sack, mouth open, eyes wide. On his chest, just over his heart, was a name carved deep into the flesh. Mar. The blood had long dried. The flies hovered but would not land. His tongue was black. His hands were curled like claws. Someone said his last meal had been goat meat. Someone else said his last word had been her name. No one dared move him. The chief tried to have the body burned, but the firewood refused to catch. The body remained for 2 days and 2 nights, untouched by heat, by dogs, by rot. Finally, an old woman wrapped it in palm leaves and dragged it to the edge of the forest. By morning it was gone. They didn't speak of it after that. The villagers avoided the path for weeks. And now, when Amara passed, they stepped aside not out of fear, but reverence. She still didn't ask for anything. She didn't accuse. Didn't demand land or food or apology. She simply was. A reminder. A reckoning. Some began leaving small bowls of water in her path, unasked. Others swept the road before she passed, even if it was already clean. Children looked at her with solemn wonder as if she were part tree, part storm. When the chief finally approached her one dawn, he did so with no guards, no pride, only quiet desperation. "What must we do?" he asked. Amara looked toward the horizon. "Remember," she said. "That's not enough," he whispered. "It's all that's left." And then she stood and walked on, her name still burning softly in the heart of the man who once bought her. Her silence spoke louder than the wind. The land was listening. And now so were they. They gathered before sunrise, barefoot and trembling, a whole village cloaked in the hush of shame. No rooster crowed. No fire cracked. Only the quiet footsteps of once proud men and weary women filing into the square, heads bowed, offerings in hand. Some brought carved figures of their ancestors. Others brought yam, dried meat, fine cloth, or beads once used only for brides. Even children had been made to come, clutching nothing but silence. She was already there. Amara stood beneath the cracked palm tree, the same one that had broken during the naming. Her cloak rested on the ground beside her, and the first light of dawn made the carvings on her skin gleam like wet stone. But there were fewer now. The names that had once shimmered across her arms and back, glowing with pain and memory, were fading. The lines were softening. As though the truth had been spoken, and the earth no longer needed to wear it. Still the name on her chest, her own name, remained. Bull. Untouched. She didn't cover it. The chief stepped forward, not in regalia but in plain cloth, barefoot like the rest. He held no staff. His face was tired, his beard untrimmed. "Please," he said, voice raw. "Tell us what you want. We have lost too much. The trees do not bear. The animals are nervous. The children wake crying and speak of shadows." Amara said nothing. A young girl, barely 7, stepped from the crowd, clinging to a reed mat with a broken corner. She walked slowly to Amara and knelt, holding the mat up with shaking hands. On it, drawn in charcoal and crushed hibiscus, was a child's picture. A woman with glowing arms and a name carved on her chest. Amara took the mat gently. She did not smile, but she nodded once. "She's the only one who has not forgotten," she said, her voice quiet but clear. The girl's mother pulled her back, bowing low. The crowd pressed in. "What must we do?" came the question again and again. "What must we do to bring peace back to our homes? The goats refuse to feed from our hands. The cassava roots are bitter. Even the moon turns its face away." Amara looked across the sea of faces, some remorseful, others hollow, a few still hiding behind silence but none untouched. The names she had spoken were still ringing, and some were still being whispered by the wind at night. She raised her voice then, just enough to be heard by all. "You do not owe me," she said. "You owe those who come after." A hush followed. "I am not here to punish," she continued. "The earth has already done that. You felt its answer. You feared it. But what you should fear more is forgetting." She turned slowly, letting the rising sun fall over her skin. "You asked what I want. I want only one law." They leaned in, all of them, as if the fate of the soil, the breath of the wind, and the light of the moon depended on her next words. "Never again," she said. Never trade blood for oil. The words hung in the air like a drumbeat. Never sell a girl's name. The crowd was still. Even the birds in the trees above held their breath. Not for silver. Not for fear. Not for convenience. If she is born, she is yours to protect. If she walks among you, her body is not yours to price. She falls, you lift her. If she speaks, you listen. Tears broke silently down cheeks. A man in the back dropped to his knees. A mother clutched her daughter's hand and nodded fiercely. And if another comes for her? Someone asked. Amara looked into the crowd, her eyes like river stone. You spit in their face, she said. You burn the path behind them. You carve her name not in the ground but in the sky. A murmur passed through the square. Grief, yes, but something else too. Resolve. A slow rising of the chest. A flicker of warmth after a long, bitter cold. The chief stepped forward again, this time with steady hands. We will speak this law aloud every season, he vowed. At every naming ceremony. At every birth. We will etch it into our shrine and write it into our stories. Amara said nothing. But she touched her chest. The crowd saw then, of all the names that had faded, only hers remained. Amara. Carved into the center of her chest, above her heart. Not in anger now, nor pain, but in survival. In defiance. In truth. You keep that name? Someone asked softly. She looked down at it. I keep it, she said, because it is mine. No one took it. They tried. But I carried it through darkness. Through chains. Through silence. Her gaze swept over the villagers. You do not name me. I name myself. A girl in the crowd repeated the words in a whisper. You do not name me. I name myself. Then another joined her. And another. Until a wave of repetition moved through the crowd like wind through the fields. Amara did not stay. That afternoon, she walked down the same road she had arrived on, past the shrine, past the well that had begun to fill again. The palm tree stood tall and split, but its fronds were beginning to stretch green once more. No one tried to stop her. She left behind no statue, no grave, no monument. Just the law. And her name, the one thing no hand, no whip, no lie could take. Some say the path she walked on still bears faint prints that never wash away. Others say girls born under red moons now come into the world with voices strong and eyes wide. But all remember what she said. Never trade blood for oil. Never sell a girl's name. Years passed and the rains came again as they always did. The earth, once cracked and bitter, softened. Crops bloomed with color and sweetness. The goats stopped trembling in their pens. The children no longer cried from shadows in the night. And yet, Amara's name never faded. Not from the soil. Not from the sky. Not from the people. In the village where she had been born and in the villages beyond, over rivers and across hills, through forests once feared, her story bloomed like a second harvest, quiet and unstoppable. No songs were sung with drums and flutes in her honor. No statues carved her likeness in stone. But her memory was more lasting than either. It lived in the smallest acts, in the choices of ordinary people. It lived in what was no longer done. No girl was ever sold again. No hand dared offer silver for a child. No elder ever wrote a name on paper unless that name had been freely given. It began quietly. A woman in a neighboring village, once known for harsh dealings, stood before a group of traders and said, "This girl is not for sale. Not for oil. Not for gold." She held her head high and stood her ground, and when the traders laughed, she said, "Ask the earth. Ask the trees. Amara watches." The laughter died. Not long after, another girl, barely 14, refused a betrothal forced upon her. Her family scolded her until she stood in the square and whispered, "My name is mine. You do not own it." The old ones froze. The girl's mother wept. And the betrothal was ended. Even the markets changed. No trader dared ask for a slave. And when one did, a man from the coast new to the region, he was met with a silence colder than stone. A silence that made his teeth chatter. He left before nightfall and his name was never spoken again. Teachers began to tell Amara's story at dusk. Not with pictures. Not with loud words. But with care. In whispers around fires, beneath the stars as the first crickets sang. There was once a girl, they said, who was sold for oil. But she came back, the children would say, their eyes bright. Yes, the elders replied. She came back without a sword. Without an army. But she had something else, the children would say. Yes, the elders smiled. She had the truth. And names on her skin, the boldest would add. And they would all grow silent then, remembering what names could mean. In time, Other villages adopted the same story. Some claimed she had passed through their lands. Some swore she had stayed a night in their barn, or whispered a blessing into their soil. No one could agree where she had gone or where she now lived, or if she still lived at all. But none dared say she was gone, because the truth she left behind never left. Every year, when the oil harvest came, that time of heat and labor, when drums once called the people to dance around the jars of rich, red palm oil, the villagers remembered. They worked as always. They sang, they boiled, they pressed. But when the counting was done and the jars were lined up in neat rows, one jar was always left untouched. It sat at the edge of the grove, away from the celebration. No one spoke over it. No one opened it. No one dared mark it for trade. It was Amara's jar. Not a tribute. A remembrance. A reminder that once a girl had been traded for oil, and the land had never forgiven. No one touched the jar. And yet it never spoiled. No matter the heat, the flies, the passage of time, the oil in that jar stayed rich, untouched by rot or age. Some said it was cursed. Others said it was blessed. But everyone agreed, it belonged to her. In some villages, girls wrote her name on the backs of their hands during festivals. Boys whispered her name before speaking to their sisters as a kind of prayer. Parents told their children, when you feel afraid to speak, remember Amara. She had no sword, and yet the earth moved for her. Some claimed that on stormy nights, when the clouds twist low and the trees bend like they remember grief, you can see her shadow at the edge of the fields, not as a spirit but as a woman watching. Waiting. Not for revenge but for promise. To see if the people still remember. And they do. There are no monuments of stone but there are laws. Written and unwritten. There are stories and jars left untouched. There are girls who walk unbound, and boys who grow up knowing the strength of silence when it speaks truth. Amara's name remains carved on a single tree, the old palm that cracked during the naming. It still stands, gnarled and wounded, but each season it bears fruit. Elders say the sap tastes sweeter near the split. No one chops its leaves. No one climbs it. It is called the listening tree now. Each child, when they come of age, is brought to stand before it. They place a hand on the bark and speak their name out loud, clearly, without shame, and vow to never sell a name that is not theirs. And if they forget, if greed or fear ever return, then the people say the carvings will return too, one by one, on the skin of the land. And the girl who bore names like wounds will return, not to punish but to remind, that the soul of a girl is not for sale, that truth walks without an army, that her name, Amara, is never forgotten.